Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I was 10 years old when this happened, and to this day, even though I'm older now, it still sits in the back of my mind like a scar that never really goes away. At the time, I lived in a small city in western Pennsylvania, in a duplex-style apartment complex. The units were stacked up and down, 2 per building, lined along a row like bricks. My mom, my dad, and all 4 of us kids lived downstairs in one of these buildings. That winter was rough for us. My dad, Eric, had to work out of state for weeks at a time doing construction jobs, and my mom, Lisa, worked nights at a warehouse about 20 minutes away. It left us kids with a lot of nights spent either with a neighbor watching us, or us just trying to hold down the fort ourselves until Mom came home around midnight. I had 3 siblings, my 8-year-old sister Hannah, my 6-year-old brother Michael, and my baby sister Claire, who was only 2. Hannah and I were always grouped together since we were the closest in age, and that night we were basically each other's anchors. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Reed, often babysat Michael and Claire because they were younger. She was an older woman with a teenage daughter, Sophie, who sometimes played with us. That night, around 9:30 p.m., Hannah and I were over at the Reed's house while Mrs. Reed kept an eye on the younger 2. Sophie had pulled out board games and we were all laughing, but eventually I told Hannah I wanted to head back to our place for a bit, maybe grab snacks or just relax in our own living room. Hannah followed without much thought. We didn't mind the dark. At least we pretended we didn't. When we walked in, the apartment felt quieter than usual. You know how sometimes a place feels different when you're the only ones there? That's how it was. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked loudly, echoing more than it normally would when the house was full. We settled in the living room. Hannah grabbed one of Mom's magazines from the coffee table, and I flipped on the TV, keeping the volume low. It was one of those quiet winter nights where every little sound outside carried: snowplows in the distance, a dog barking, the occasional car crunching along the icy road. 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. At first, neither of us thought much of it. We had a handful of neighbors, and sometimes they'd stop by. I looked at Hannah and said, "Check who it is before you open it." She tiptoed to the peephole, put her eye to it, then leaned back, her face puzzled. "I don't know who that is," she whispered. That threw me off. "Move, let me see." I pressed my face against the door. Standing there was a man I'd never seen before. He looked like he was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. He was tall, scruffy, with gray stubble across his jaw. His clothes looked dirty. A red flannel shirt under a heavy brown jacket, jeans stained at the knees, and scuffed work boots that looked like they'd been through a lot. He didn't look like someone you'd expect to see in the middle of our apartment complex at night. I stepped back. Hannah whispered, "Who is he?" "No idea," I said, lowering my voice. The knock came again, firmer this time. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the chain but kept the door cracked just enough. The man leaned slightly, peering in at me and Hannah. His breath was visible in the cold, and there was something in his eyes that made my stomach turn. Not anger exactly, but something unsettled. "You must be Eric's kids," he said. His voice was gravelly. I froze. Who are you?" "I'm a friend of your grandfather's," he replied smoothly, almost rehearsed. "I know your dad too. He's a good man." I glanced at Hannah. Her small hand clutched my sleeve. The man smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Your mom home?" "No," I said too quickly. He nodded slowly, as if he already knew. "Well, I talked to her earlier today." "She knows me. I just wanted to stop by, maybe see her." "Why don't you let me come inside and wait?" "She wouldn't mind." That's when my chest tightened. Everything in me screamed that something was wrong. I could almost feel Hannah's heart pounding through her grip on me. Just then, My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sudden sound made me jump. The man cocked his head. "That's probably her now," I said quickly. "I'll ask if you can come in." Before he could answer, I shut the door and quietly locked both locks. My hands were shaking. The phone wasn't Mom. It was my best friend Jenna, who lived a few buildings down. I answered in a whisper. "Hey, where are you?" she asked immediately. "At home." "Why?" "My mom just saw some creepy guy hanging around your building," Jenna said quickly. "She saw him looking in windows before he even knocked on your door. She called the cops already. Don't open the door, okay?" My blood went cold. I turned to Hannah. "We need to get out." Now we ran to the bedroom we shared. I yanked the window open, the icy air rushing in. "Go," I told Hannah. She hesitated. "But, go," I hissed. She climbed out first, landing clumsily in the snow. I followed, pulling the window shut behind me. We crouched low and moved along the back of the building, trying to stay out of sight. My breath came fast, puffing white in the cold. My ears strained for footsteps, for any sound of the man circling. We cut through the narrow alley between two buildings, our shoes crunching softly in the snow. Hannah whispered, "Is he following us?" "Don't look back," I muttered. We finally reached Jenna's house and rushed inside, slamming the door. Jenna's mom, Mrs. Harris, was on the phone, her voice low and urgent. "Are you okay?" she asked us quickly. We both nodded, though I could feel Hannah trembling beside me. The police arrived before my mom. 2 officers took statements from us, their radios crackling as they stepped back outside to search. They checked our apartment too. But the man was gone. They said they'd patrol the area, but unless he came back, there wasn't much they could do. When my mom finally got there, she looked pale, shaken. She hugged us tight, her hands cold from the night air. Later, after things settled a little, Mom told me something that made my stomach twist even more. Earlier that day, before work, she had gone to a corner store with our upstairs neighbor. She had taken baby Claire in the stroller. As they were leaving, a man had stopped her. He looked at Claire, then at Mom. "He looks familiar," he'd said. "Who's his dad?" Mom, caught off guard, just told him my dad's first name, Eric. The man then said our last name. Mom hadn't told him. "You're Eric's wife, huh?" "I knew your father-in-law," he had said. Mom had laughed it off and left quickly, uneasy. She'd even taken a different route home, hoping to throw him off if he was following. But he must have found his way to our apartment anyway. 2 days later, I overheard Mom talking to Mrs. Reed. She had gone to the leasing office to check the security footage. Around 4 a.m., the man had come back. He tried every window, one by one. Each one was locked, but he spent time at each, testing, pulling, pressing his face close. The camera showed him circling our apartment slowly, methodically, and then just before sunrise, he walked away into the snow and never came back. I think about it sometimes. What if I had let him in? What if Jenna's mom hadn't seen him before he knocked? What if one of those windows hadn't been locked? I'll never know what he really wanted, but I know for sure that night could have ended in a way I don't even want to imagine. And that thought alone has kept me up on more nights than I can count. I was 10 years old when this happened, and even now, 8 years later, I can still remember every sound, every shadow, every breath I took that night as if it's carved into me forever. Back then, my family lived in a quiet suburb outside of Bergen, Norway. It wasn't the kind of place you worried much about crime. People left their bikes unlocked in their yards, kids walked alone to school, and neighbors still borrowed sugar from each other. My parents weren't divorced yet, and I lived with both of them and my 2 younger brothers, Daniel, who was 6 at the time, and Adrian, who was only 3. That Friday evening in late autumn, the kind where the air gets dark far too early, my parents had planned to take Daniel and Adrian with them to IKEA. They wanted to get a new bed frame and a couple of shelves for the living room. I hated IKEA trips even as a kid. The long walking paths through the store felt like endless mazes, And by the end, you were tired, cranky, and usually arguing over a lamp. So when my mom, Helena, asked if I wanted to come, I said, "No, I'll stay home. I'm tired." "Are you sure, Alina?" my mom asked, standing in the hallway with her jacket halfway zipped. "Yeah," I said, already sitting cross-legged on the couch, TV remote in hand. "I'll be fine." My dad, Lars, gave me a quick glance. "We won't be long. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone." I nodded. "I know." That was the kind of neighborhood where you didn't feel unsafe, but my dad was the type who never skipped on warnings. They left, and suddenly, the apartment felt bigger than usual. Quiet, too. I turned on the TV, flipped through a few channels until I landed on some cartoon rerun. The glow of the screen painted the walls in flickering colors, and for a while, I just let myself sink into it. But around 30 minutes later, I started craving candy. It was Friday after all, and in Norway, fridagskos, Friday coziness, is a kind of tradition. Chips, chocolate, soda, something sweet to celebrate the weekend. The small convenience store, Solberg's, was less than a 10-minute walk from our apartment. I grabbed my hoodie, pulled it over my head, and slipped on my sneakers. Locking the door behind me, I stuffed the key into my pocket and started walking. The sky was already dark, but the streetlights gave the road a soft orange glow. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves, since it had rained earlier that day. The streets were quiet, except for a few people walking their dogs. By the time I got to Solberg's, I had already rehearsed in my head exactly what I'd buy: a bag of Smash, a small soda, maybe some sour candy. The lady at the counter, an older woman named Randy, knew my family well. "All alone tonight, Alina?" she asked as she scanned my things. "Yeah, my parents went to IKEA, I replied. "Ah, I see. Well, enjoy your treats." She smiled, handing me the bag. I said thank you and walked back out, hugging the little plastic bag against me. Halfway home, that's when I noticed him. A man on a bicycle was approaching from the opposite side of the street. At first glance, he looked like he was struggling to keep balance. The bike wobbled back and forth, his legs pedaling unevenly. My first thought was that he was drunk. That wasn't common in our area, but not impossible. I glanced at him quickly, not wanting to make eye contact. His jacket was too thin for the cold weather, his hair messy, and even from a distance I could feel something off. He muttered something as he rode past, and I kept walking faster. But then he shouted, "Hey, stop a second." His voice cracked, slurred, but loud enough that it echoed through the empty street. I froze for half a second before forcing myself to keep walking. My heartbeat quickened. "Girl! Wait." That time it was clearer. He was talking to me. I broke into a run, clutching the bag tighter. Behind me I heard the screech of his bike as he turned around. The chain rattled. My sneakers slapped against the pavement. Our apartment complex backed onto a small patch of forest that acted as a shortcut. If I took that path, I'd reach home faster than if I stayed on the main road. Without thinking twice, I darted into the woods. The leaves crunched under my feet, branches snapping back into place as I brushed past. My lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I risked one glance back and saw him. He had gotten off his bike, stumbling into the path after me. "Wait, I just want to talk," he yelled, his voice carrying through the trees. I didn't answer. I just ran harder. By the time I burst out of the woods and saw our apartment building, my chest was heaving and my legs ached. I fumbled with the key, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it, before finally unlocking the door. I slammed it shut behind me and twisted the lock. For a second, I just stood there, listening to the pounding of my heart. Then I moved quietly into the living room, where the two large windows faced the front yard. I didn't turn on the lights, afraid of being seen. Instead, I crouched and carefully peeked through the blinds. He was there, standing right in front of our door, only a few feet away, breathing heavily as if he had just run the same distance I had. His face was pale under the yellow glow of the streetlight, and his eyes darted around nervously before locking on the window. On me. I stumbled back, my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. A moment later, he walked right up to the door and started knocking. "Hey," he said, his tone uneven, almost coaxing. "Open up. I just want to talk." The knocking grew louder. My whole body trembled. I thought about calling my mom, but I was too terrified to move. "Come on," he muttered, pressing his forehead against the door. "Don't be scared." "Just open then." Headlights cut across the yard. Our neighbor, Mr. Johansson, was pulling into his driveway. The man froze, glanced at the car, then hurried back to his bicycle. Without another word, he jumped on it and pedaled off into the darkness, swaying just like before. I stayed crouched by the window until I couldn't hear him anymore. When my parents finally came home with the boys, I didn't say a word. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want them to think I'd made a mistake by staying home, or maybe because I was too shaken to put it into words. It wasn't until years later, when I was 16, that I told my mom. She went pale, her hand covering her mouth, horrified. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Alina, that's terrifying." And all I could do was shrug, even though the memory still haunted me. Because the truth is, I didn't have an answer. That night changed the way I saw safety. It was the first time I realized danger could creep into even the quietest corners of the world. And the image of that man's eyes staring at me through the glass, it's something I'll never forget. I was 18 years old in the spring of 2009, just a couple of weeks away from graduating high school. At the time, my life looked a lot like every other senior's in my town. I lived in a quiet neighborhood in Maplewood, Ohio, with my mom, Angela, and my younger sister, Mariah, who was 14. My dad hadn't lived with us for years. He had left when I was 11, and though I sometimes resented him for it, I had grown used to life with just the three of us. I was on the football team at Maplewood High, and while I didn't always enjoy the practices, I loved the rush of Friday night games, the sound of the crowd cheering, and the sense of belonging with my teammates. Back then, football was one of the few things that gave me a real sense of identity. My best friend Marcus used to joke that if football didn't exist, half of us wouldn't know what to do with our lives. He wasn't wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon, late May, and I had just come home from one of our grueling practices. My shirt was plastered to my back with sweat, and my legs felt like they'd been carrying bricks all day. When I stepped inside, the house was quiet. The first thing I noticed was a note on the kitchen counter in my mom's familiar handwriting. "Went to the grocery store. Won't be back until later. Heat up the leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry. Mom." I read it quickly and sighed, setting my gym bag down by the couch. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual, though I chalked it up to being tired. With the house empty, I decided to take one of my long, relaxing showers. I knew I'd get scolded later for running up the water bill, but it always felt worth it. As I grabbed a towel from the linen closet upstairs, I called out, half to myself, "Man, I stink. This is gonna feel good." I cranked on the shower and let the hot water run. Stepping in, I leaned my head back, letting the spray wash away the sweat and grime of practice. When I was home alone, showers were my guilty pleasure. I could stand there for 20 minutes, maybe even 30 without a single interruption. I don't know how long I'd been in when I heard the first sound, the distinct loud beep of our smart lock downstairs. I froze, my hand still pressed against the tiled wall. The noise wasn't faint. It cut through the running water and the thick bathroom walls clear as day. That beep only meant one thing. Someone had unlocked the front door. "Mom?" I whispered under my breath. I shut the water off instantly, heart pounding in my chest. Wrapping the towel around my waist, I pressed my ear to the door. I didn't hear anything at first, just silence. Pulling on some shorts and a t-shirt as quickly as I could, I crept out of the bathroom and down the stairs. From the top of the landing, I could see that the front door was slightly ajar. That didn't make sense. My mom's car wasn't in the driveway. She couldn't have just walked here with bags of groceries, not with how far away the store was. I stepped outside, scanning the street. No car. No movement. The evening light stretched long shadows across the lawn. My gut twisted. This doesn't feel right, I muttered, trying to convince myself it was nothing. I turned back toward the house and stepped inside, moving cautiously. I checked the living room first. Nothing. Then I turned into the kitchen, and that's when my blood ran cold. A man I had never seen before was crouched low near the pantry. His back was to me, but I could see he was holding something metallic, glinting under the overhead light. At first, I thought it was some kind of tool, but then the shape registered. It was a knife. I slapped a hand over my mouth, every muscle in my body locking up. He hadn't noticed me. Not yet. For a split second, I thought about bolting out the front door, but if he turned and saw me, I'd never outrun him. My phone was upstairs in my room. The only thing I could do was retreat quietly and hope he didn't hear me. I backed up the stairs, one careful step at a time, until I was in my room with the door shut and locked. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? A calm, female voice answered. I tried to steady my breathing, but the words spilled out in a frantic whisper. There's someone in my house. He's got a knife. Please, please send someone. The operator's tone softened, but it was firm. Stay hidden. Do not try to confront him. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Tears stung my eyes as I crouched near my bed. My heart felt like it was beating in my throat. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, creaking on the staircase. Each one was like a hammer in my skull. I gripped the phone tighter. He's coming upstairs, I whispered. Stay quiet, the operator urged. Don't make a sound. Help is close. The footsteps stopped outside my door. For a few seconds, the silence was worse than the noise. Then came a knock, a slow, steady knock. Kid? A man's voice drawled through the door, low and unsettling. I know you're in there. My whole body shook. Please hurry, I mouthed to the phone. The knock grew louder. Then, suddenly, the door slammed open, the cheap lock snapping off the frame. He stepped inside. A man in his late 30s, gaunt face, greasy hair sticking to his forehead. His eyes were sunken, his hand gripping the knife tight. His gaze darted around the room, searching. I held my breath, my body pressed into the farthest corner. He took a step closer, then froze. From outside, faint at first, came the sound of sirens. Getting louder, closer. His head jerked toward the window. He cursed under his breath and bolted out of the room. I heard him thundering down the stairs, then the slam of the back door. Moments later, heavy knocks rattled the front door. Police! Open up! I stumbled down the stairs, my whole body trembling as I yanked the door open. 3 officers stood there, one of them already moving past me to clear the house. Are you okay? Another asked. I nodded, my throat dry. He was just here. He had a knife. He went out the back. My mom pulled into the driveway not long after, her face pale with shock when she saw the squad cars outside. She dropped her grocery bags on the sidewalk and rushed toward me. Michael! Oh my God, are you okay? She cried, wrapping me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. I broke then, sobbing into her shoulder. The police never found him. They told us later he must have escaped through the breezeway door, which had another lock, one that looked like it had been picked. There were no broken windows, no forced entry anywhere else. To this day, I don't know how he knew the code to our front door, or why he chose our house. But I'll never forget the sound of that knock at my bedroom door, or the way his voice cut through the silence of my home. Sometimes, even now, when I hear a door creak or the faint beep of a lock, I feel that same icy fear crawl up my spine, because I know how close I came to never making it out of that room alive. I was 13 years old when it happened, and no matter how much time has passed, I still think about it almost every night before bed. It's one of those memories that doesn't fade, even when you wish it would. Back then, I lived with my dad, Martin, and my older brother, Tom, in a modest duplex on the east side of Dayton, Ohio. It wasn't the best part of town, but it wasn't the worst either. The kind of place where people left their cars unlocked sometimes, but you also heard police sirens a couple of nights a week. Our duplex had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room, a small kitchen, and a sliding glass door that opened into a cramped backyard. My dad and I shared one of the bedrooms, while Tom, who was 16, had the other one to himself. Sharing a room with my dad wasn't ideal, but I didn't complain. He worked long days in construction, so most nights he wasn't even there when I went to bed. Plus, having his stuff around, his boots by the wall, his jacket tossed over the chair, gave me a kind of comfort. Like even when he wasn't home, some piece of him still was. My parents had divorced a few years earlier. My mom lived on the other side of town with her boyfriend, and I visited her on weekends sometimes. But it was Dad who had full custody of me and Tom. He tried his best, but he was rough around the edges. He drank a lot, worked a lot, and by the time he was home, he was usually too tired to do much besides sit in front of the TV or fall asleep in his chair. Tom was different. He was in that teenage stage where everything revolved around his friends, his girlfriend, and being anywhere that wasn't home. He had his own car, a beat-up Ford Taurus, and that thing was his ticket to freedom. He came and went at all hours, and Dad rarely stopped him. "He's just a kid," Dad would say. "Let him make his mistakes." That left me on my own more often than not, and honestly, I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. I liked having the house to myself. I'd sprawl out on the floor with my PlayStation, lose myself in video games, and eat whatever junk food I could find in the pantry without Tom yelling at me for finishing the good chips. The game I played most back then was Resident Evil. Looking back, it was probably not the healthiest thing for a 13-year-old to be addicted to a survival horror game, but I couldn't help it. I loved the atmosphere, the puzzles, the fear of turning a corner and not knowing what was waiting. It was terrifying, sure, but it was a safe kind of terrifying. A kind you could control by hitting pause. Real life didn't have that button. That night started like so many others. Tom had gone out around 9 o'clock. "Don't wait up for me," he said, tugging his hoodie on as he headed toward the front door. "Where are you going?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be vague. He gave me that smirk older brothers perfect at a young age, the one that says you don't need to know. "Out," he replied simply. Dad was sitting on the couch, lacing up his boots. "Don't lock yourself out again," he said to Tom. "Last time you woke me up at 2 in the damn morning banging on the window." Tom rolled his eyes. Yeah. You think I'm kidding?" Dad shot back. "You do it again. You're sleeping in the car." "Fine," Tom muttered, and he was gone. Dad stood, slipped on his jacket, and turned toward me. "I'll be back late," he said. "You good here?" "Yeah," I said, not looking up from the controller in my hands. "You lock the door after me?" "I will." His face softened. "That's my boy." He paused, scratching his jaw like he was about to say something else, then just muttered, "Love you, kid." "Love you too," I said automatically. And just like that, I was alone. I locked the front door, slid the deadbolt, and returned to the TV. The minutes blurred into hours as I wandered through the pixelated halls of the Spencer mansion, fighting off zombies and trying to conserve ammo. Outside, cars came and went, the hum of the neighborhood fading as people turned in for the night. By midnight, I could barely keep my eyes open. I saved my game, shut off the PlayStation, and crawled into bed. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of the old wood settling. That's when I heard it. Shh. The unmistakable sound of the backsliding door being forced open. It was loud, louder than it had any right to be. That door was stubborn. You had to really shove it to make it move. My eyes flew open, my chest tightening. It couldn't be Tom. He never came in that way. And Dad? Dad always had his key. I froze, ears straining. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Crossing the dining room, moving into the kitchen. Whoever it was, They weren't trying to be quiet. My heart hammered. I told myself to yell, to say Dad or Tom, but I didn't. Something deep down told me it wasn't them. A figure passed by my bedroom doorway. Just a shadow, a silhouette, but enough to confirm what I already feared. Someone was in our house. They stepped into the bathroom right next to my room. The light flicked on, spilling a harsh glow directly into my bedroom. My blanket suddenly felt like the flimsiest shield in the world. I held my breath. The man didn't say anything. He didn't check on me. He just lingered. Then he walked out, leaving the bathroom light on, and moved into Tom's room. I heard drawers opening, clothes rustling, things being shuffled around. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself, tears welling in my eyes. Minutes stretched like hours. Then the footsteps came again, back past my room. The man's shadow slid across the doorway. I braced myself. I knew he was going to step in, that at any second he'd pull back my blanket and find me trembling underneath. But he didn't. He just kept walking. Back into the bathroom. Out again. Into the living room. Back again. Over and over. His footsteps grew heavier, angrier. Sometimes he huffed under his breath, like he was frustrated. I was sure, absolutely sure, he knew I was there. He walked by my open door at least 20 times, but he never came in. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded. The sliding door screeched open again. Then silence. I didn't move. Not for minutes. Not for an hour. My body shook violently, but I stayed still, terrified that if I shifted even an inch, he'd come back. At some point, exhaustion dragged me into a restless sleep. When I woke, sunlight filled the room. Dad was snoring beside me, still dressed in his work clothes from the night before. Tom was in his room, asleep, his shoes kicked halfway across the floor. I shot up, panicked. "Dad," I said, shaking him. "Dad." He groaned, rubbed his eyes. "What?" "Were you home last night?" I demanded. "What are you talking about?" "Did you come in through the back door?" He frowned. "No." "Why would I do that?" "I got my key." I turned to Tom, who had stumbled into the hallway, yawning. "What about you?" I asked. "Did you come in the back way?" He blinked at me, confused. "Why would I?" "I came in the front. My keys in my pocket." He pulled it out to show me. I pressed them both again and again, but they swore it wasn't them. And the strangest part? Nothing was missing. No broken locks, no missing money, no stolen electronics. Just the memory of a man walking back and forth 20 times, right past my wide-open bedroom door, and never once stepping inside. I'm 34 now, and I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know he had every chance to hurt me. But he didn't. Sometimes I tell myself it was a burglar, spooked by something. Sometimes I tell myself I dreamed it. But deep down, I know the truth. There was a man in our house that night. And for some reason, he decided to leave me alive. I never imagined my mid-20s would look like this. When I was younger, I thought by 24 I'd have a steady career, maybe a decent apartment decorated the way I wanted, and a little more confidence in myself. But instead, I found myself stuck in Maple Crest Towers, a rundown high-rise in the suburban sprawl of Brookhaven, barely making ends meet and feeling like the ground beneath me was always about to crumble. It all started when the pandemic hit. Back in early 2020, I had been working as a junior account coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Chicago. The work wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me enough to live independently for the first time in my life. But when the company folded that summer, the domino effect began. My savings drained, job applications went unanswered, and unemployment checks were late or inconsistent. By fall, I had already missed rent once, then twice. I tried negotiating, But my landlord, Mr. Whitaker, wasn't the type to sugarcoat things. He was in his 50s, tall, thin, always wearing neatly pressed slacks even when he came to collect rent. He had a stern but not entirely unkind face, the kind of man who was strict but not heartless. I'll never forget the day he knocked on my door in October. "Lila," Mr. Whitaker said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We've got to talk about these late payments." I stood there barefoot in sweatpants, clutching my phone like it was some kind of shield. "I know. I'm trying. I've been applying to jobs nonstop. I even interviewed last week." "I understand," he interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "But this is the third month in a row. I can't keep giving extensions forever. You need to give me something or I'll have no choice but to start the eviction process." His words stung even though I knew he wasn't wrong. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'll figure it out. I promise." After he left, I sat down on the couch, pulling my knees to my chest. My apartment felt smaller than ever. Just a one-bedroom with beige walls, thin carpets, and a kitchen counter that always seemed a little sticky no matter how much I scrubbed. Out of habit, I texted my boyfriend, Ethan. Me. "Rough day. Whitaker's threatening eviction again. Ethan. I'm sorry, babe. I know you're trying. Wish I could do more. Me. Same. I feel like such a burden. Ethan. Stop that. You're not a burden. You've just had bad luck. We'll get through this." Ethan and I had been dating for almost a year. He lived across town in a rented duplex with a roommate working long shifts at an auto shop. He didn't have much extra money either, but he gave me the one thing I needed most: reassurance. That evening, I tried to distract myself by cleaning. I picked up clothes from the bedroom floor, washed dishes that had piled up in the sink, and lit a cheap vanilla-scented candle on the counter. By the time the sun dipped behind the horizon, I changed into jeans and a soft sweater, telling myself maybe putting effort into my appearance would help my mood. I even took a mirror selfie in my bedroom to send to Ethan with the caption, "At least I don't look like a total wreck, right?" I expected him to reply with a heart emoji or some flirty remark. Instead, his text came within seconds. "Ethan. Babe? Who's that in the background?" I frowned, confused. Me. "What are you talking about?" Ethan. "Behind you. The closet." Look at the picture again. I opened the photo and zoomed in. My stomach dropped. Inside the narrow crack of my closet door, a dark silhouette was visible. It was faint but undeniable, the outline of a tall figure, leaning just enough that its head and one shoulder were visible in the shadows. For several seconds I couldn't move. My brain scrambled to rationalize it. Maybe it was my winter coat bunched weirdly. Maybe it was the shadows from my lamp. But the longer I stared, the more it became obvious. This wasn't random shapes. This was someone. My phone buzzed again. "Ethan. Lila. Get out of there." Now my chest tightened. I was sitting on my bed, my back toward the closet. Every instinct screamed not to turn around. I forced myself to breathe slowly. If I panicked, if I made it obvious I knew someone was there, it might trigger them to act. So I slid off the bed as casually as possible, walked toward the door without looking back, and stepped into the hallway. I locked the door with shaking hands and then bolted. The elevator ride to the lobby felt endless, every second dragging as I stared at the numbers slowly lighting up. My legs trembled so badly I nearly collapsed when the doors finally opened. "George!" I shouted the moment I saw the night security guard at his desk. George had worked at Maple Crest for years. He was in his late 40s with graying hair and a stocky build. Usually, he was the kind of guy who cracked jokes about the Bears or complained about broken vending machines, but when he saw my face, all color drained from his. "What happened?" he asked, already standing. "There's someone in my apartment," I stammered. "In my closet. I swear I saw. Please, you have to come with me." George grabbed his flashlight and radio, his tone shifting into something firm and professional. "Stay close to me." We rode the elevator back up together. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. When we reached my floor, George motioned for me to stay behind him. He unlocked my apartment door with his master key, flashlight raised. The room was silent, but something was different. My closet door was now wide open, and my bedroom window, locked earlier, was raised halfway, the curtains blowing gently from the cold night air. George's voice was low. "Did you open this?" I shook my head violently. "No, I never touched that window. I live on the 7th floor. Nobody could—" My words trailed off, because the impossible was staring us both in the face. Whoever had been in my closet hadn't left through the hallway. They had gone through the window, 7 floors up. George swept the flashlight beam across the room, his jaw tightening. "I'll check the stairwells. Stay in the lobby until I say otherwise." I stood frozen, unable to process what I had just seen. The window rattled softly from the night wind, as though mocking me. There was no fire escape outside, no ledge wide enough for a person to stand on, no balcony, nothing. And yet, someone had been there. George told me again to head downstairs, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. "What if they're still in here?" I whispered, my voice cracking. George glanced at me, his jaw tight. "Then that's my job to handle." "Go, Lila." I obeyed, moving slowly into the hall. My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone once before managing to shove it into my sweater pocket. I didn't take the elevator this time. I ran down the 7 flights of stairs, heart hammering, until I burst into the lobby. The desk attendant looked up, startled. "You okay?" I just shook my head, sinking into one of the vinyl chairs. My whole body felt like it had been dunked in ice water. Minutes stretched. At one point, Ethan called me, his voice frantic through the speaker. "Lila, are you safe? Talk to me." "I'm downstairs," I whispered. George went to check. "Ethan, I swear there was someone in my closet. And then the window." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was firmer. "Stay there. Don't go back up until George clears it." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, George came down the elevator. He looked tired, uneasy, but not surprised. "I didn't find anyone," he said, lowering his flashlight. "I checked your place top to bottom. Nobody's there now." "But the window," I started. "I saw it," he cut in, "and I believe you. But if someone went out that way, I don't know how. 7th floor's a long way down." I stared at him, waiting for some explanation, something logical, but all he did was pat my shoulder. "I'll file a report. For tonight, maybe stay somewhere else. A friend's place, just in case." That's exactly what I did. Ethan came to get me, and I stayed at his duplex that night. I barely slept, jolting awake every time I thought I heard a creak or saw a shadow. The next morning in the daylight, I forced myself to return to my apartment. I expected to find evidence, footprints, scuff marks near the window, something. But everything was eerily ordinary. The only trace was the faint smell of cold air in my bedroom, as though the window had been open far longer than just a few minutes. Mr. Whitaker stopped by later that day after George filled him in. "You need to file a police report," he told me. "Even if they don't find anything, it's better to have it on record." So I did. 2 officers came by, asking the usual questions. Did I see anyone? Did I hear anything? Did I have enemies, an ex who might stalk me? I told them no, no, no. They checked the locks, took notes, and left with the kind of expression that said they didn't really believe me. Life moved on, but something changed inside me after that night. I couldn't relax in my own apartment. Every creak of the pipes, every shift of shadows across the wall made my heart race. I started sleeping with a chair wedged under my doorknob, the TV left on low just so I wouldn't be alone in the silence. Ethan tried to reassure me, but even he looked uneasy whenever we talked about it. One night, weeks later, he admitted, "I keep thinking about that picture you sent. The figure in the closet. Lila. It looked like it was leaning toward you, like it wanted to be seen. His words stuck with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. Eventually, the rent situation caught up with me. Despite Mr. Whitaker's patience, I couldn't catch up, and by December I had to move back in with my parents. Packing up my things felt surreal, like I was abandoning not just an apartment but the version of myself who had tried so hard to hold on. When I closed the door to Unit 7C for the last time, I looked back one final time. The closet door was cracked open again, just a sliver. I swear I had shut it. To this day, I don't know if it was a person who somehow vanished or something else entirely. I don't know how anyone could have slipped out of a 7th-floor window without falling to their death. And sometimes, late at night, when I scroll too far back in my camera roll and stumble on that picture, the one with the shadowy figure, I feel that same ice-cold dread wash over me. Because every time I zoom in, I notice something I hadn't before. A faint pale outline of what looks like a hand pressing against the inside of the closet door. Like it wasn't just hiding, like it was waiting. And I'll never know if it still is. I've always considered myself someone who doesn't scare easily. Horror movies, I grew up on them. Creepy true crime podcasts, I binged them while doing homework. Being alone in a big house never really fazed me before. But what happened on that Thursday in late April, April 25th to be exact, still lingers in my mind like a scar that hasn't healed. I'm 20 years old, a college sophomore, and I live with my parents in a semi-rural part of Oregon, about 20 minutes outside of a mid-sized city. My parents bought the property a few years ago, mostly because my mom wanted the space and my dad liked the idea of retiring away from traffic. The house sits on a hill with a long gravel driveway, overlooking about 3 acres of woods and open field. From my bedroom window upstairs, I can see all the way down the property, past the slope where the land drops into the tree line. That Thursday morning, I was alone. My mom works as a nurse, and she had a 12-hour shift that day. My dad was already at his job. He works in logistics for a warehouse, usually gone by 6 in the morning. I had a college class at noon, so I was taking my time getting ready, sipping coffee and half studying my notes while curled up on the couch in a hoodie. Everything was normal until it wasn't. Around 10:30, I decided to head back upstairs to grab my backpack. As I passed my window, I pulled open the blinds to let some sunlight in. That's when I saw him. A man. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. He was down on the slope, standing with his hands on his hips, staring across our property like he owned it. He looked to be mid-30s, wearing jeans and a faded baseball cap, maybe 5 feet 10 inches or so, average build. Nothing inherently terrifying about him, except for the fact that I had no idea who he was or why he was there. I froze for a second, staring. Maybe he's a contractor, I muttered under my breath. My parents had been talking about renovating the deck, and sometimes people came by to give estimates. But usually, they at least parked in the driveway, rang the doorbell, knocked. Something. This guy hadn't. He was just wandering. I grabbed my phone and dialed my dad. "Hey," I said as soon as he picked up. "Did you hire someone to come by the house today?" "There's some guy outside." "What guy?" my dad asked. He sounded tired, probably in the middle of his morning chaos at work. "Some random guy, ball-cap jeans. He's walking around down the hill." "I didn't hire anybody," Dad said firmly. "Hold on, let me call your mom. Stay inside and lock the doors, okay?" "Okay." I hung up and tried to keep my breathing steady. When I looked again, the man had moved. He was no longer down the slope. He was in the driveway, just casually strolling, glancing at the house, peering at the side yard like he was inspecting something. Something about the way he moved unsettled me. He didn't look lost. He didn't look like someone confused about where to go. He looked confident, like he belonged there. I ducked away from the window. I went around the house, checking every door and window, making sure everything was locked. My hands were shaking, and I kept telling myself I was overreacting. But there was this tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away. My dad called back. Your mom says she didn't hire anyone either, he told me. His voice was sharper this time. Listen, call the police. Don't wait. Just call. I'll keep my phone on me. Okay. I grabbed the landline, our cell service is spotty in the house, and dialed the local police station. The woman who answered didn't sound concerned. I explained everything. Strange man, walking around the property, no reason to be there. She sighed, almost like I was wasting her time, and said, "That's not an emergency. Call the non-emergency line." My stomach dropped. "Ma'am, I'm a college student home alone, and there's a man circling my house. He hasn't knocked, hasn't said anything. He's just there. Call the non-emergency line," she repeated, giving me the number. I hung up, frustrated, and immediately dialed it. The call rang, then clicked to an automated voice. "Thank you for calling the non-emergency hotline. Nobody is available at this time. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911. I stared at the phone, stunned. This wasn't real. It felt like some cruel test. I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, almost too calm. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man outside my house, I said quickly. I don't know who he is. He's been walking around for at least 15 minutes. He has a white Honda parked in front of my house. No plates. Please send someone. The operator asked me a series of questions. His clothing, his build, whether he was armed. I peeked through the blinds, whispering what I saw. By now the man was sitting in his car. I could hear something blasting from inside. Maybe a radio, maybe a phone call. A loud male voice carried through the still air. "Stay on the line with me," I told the operator. Then, suddenly, the call cut out. Just dead silence, followed by the sharp click of a disconnect tone. I blinked, staring at the phone. Before I could redial, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. My first thought, maybe it was the dispatcher calling me back. I answered. All I heard was heavy breathing, deep, slow, intentionally drawn out. My blood ran cold. "Hello?" My voice cracked. No response. Just the breathing. I slammed the phone down, heart racing, and dialed 911 again. This time, a different operator answered, and before I could even explain, she said, "We're already dispatching officers to your address. Stay calm, stay inside." 20 minutes crawled by. I kept peeking from the upstairs window. The man was still in his car. He didn't leave, didn't even shift much, just sat there, like he was waiting for something. My hands trembled so badly I could barely text my dad. They still aren't here. He's still outside. Dad called me immediately. "Stay upstairs." "Don't go near the door." "I know," I whispered. Every creak in the house felt amplified. Every shadow seemed like it was moving. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw flashing lights at the bottom of the driveway. Relief washed over me until I realized the timing. The exact moment the police pulled in, the man started his car. He drove forward slowly, meeting them halfway. I watched as the cops stopped him. They talked for a few minutes, then let him go. When one of the officers finally walked up to my door, I opened it just enough to see his badge. "Ma'am," he said calmly, handing me a flyer. The man said he's a landscaper. He had an appointment here. I blinked at him. A landscaper? My parents never hired one. He shrugged. "Well, that's what he told us. Nothing illegal about being in your driveway." And just like that, they left. I called my mom as soon as they pulled away. "The cops said it was a landscaper," I told her, still shaking. "A landscaper?" she repeated, confused. "Why would we hire one? Our yard doesn't need work. I didn't call anybody. Dad didn't either." We both sat in silence for a moment. "So, who the hell was that man?" I whispered. No answer. Just the sound of my mom breathing heavily on the other end. That night I barely slept. Every sound outside felt like footsteps. Every passing car made me check the window. The next morning, I walked down to where the white Honda had been parked. On the ground, half covered in gravel, was the flyer the cop had handed me. A generic advertisement for lawn care services. No business name, no phone number, just an email address scribbled in shaky handwriting. I never emailed it. I never called. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the way that man moved around my house with such confidence, the way he looked at the windows, the heavy breathing on the phone right after my 911 call dropped. And I wonder if I was supposed to be more than just a house he inspected. I never liked staying home alone, not because I was afraid of the dark, but because silence never sat right with me. Growing up, I always had noise around me. TV in the background, my mom humming in the kitchen, my younger cousin blasting video games down the hall. When everything was quiet, I felt like I could hear my own heartbeat too loudly, like the walls were listening. But by the time this story took place, I was 23 and living alone for the first time in my life in a 2-story townhouse on the outskirts of a mid-sized city in Indiana. My name is Elijah Whitaker, though most of my friends just call me Eli. I'd moved into that townhouse only 6 months earlier, in May of 2019, after finally saving enough to leave the apartment I'd shared with roommates since college. At first, it felt like freedom. I could decorate however I wanted, play music as loud as I wanted, leave the dishes in the sink without some passive-aggressive sticky note appearing. But that freedom came with loneliness too. I worked full-time as a loan officer at a local credit union, which meant long days in a sterile office, followed by long evenings of quiet when I came home. I wasn't dating anyone seriously at the time, and most of my friends were settling into their own routines with spouses, kids, or moving to different states for work. I told myself I liked the quiet. I even convinced myself sometimes, but then, things like what happened that night, well, they reminded me why silence was never my friend. That week had been stressful. The holiday season was in full swing, and people were desperate for money. Small loans, refinancing, credit approvals. The branch had been flooded with clients. By the time I left on Friday, December 13th, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My coworker, Trent Myers, called after me as I was clocking out. "Hey, Whitaker," he said, running a hand through his messy blonde hair. "Couple of us are grabbing drinks at O'Malley's. You coming?" I shook my head. "Not tonight, man." "I'm wiped. Just want to crash," Trent smirked. "Suit yourself. Don't let that big old house of yours eat you alive." I laughed, but it stuck with me longer than it should have. Saturday morning, I woke up around 9. The winter light pushed through the blinds in my bedroom, thin and pale. I made coffee, put on a record, Fleetwood Mac, because my mom used to play it every Saturday when she cleaned, and tried to relax. Around noon, I got a call from my mom. "You coming tomorrow, right?" she asked. "Yeah, of course," I said, sipping coffee. "What time you want me there?" "Early afternoon's fine." "I'll make lasagna. Your Uncle Martin and your cousin Noah are coming too." "Sounds good." It was normal, familiar, comforting. But I didn't realize how much I would cling to that normality later. By the time the sun set, I decided to order food instead of cooking. I was scrolling through my phone when I heard a faint sound from outside, like footsteps in snow. I froze, listening. It could have been a neighbor. My townhouse was part of a small cluster at the end of a cul-de-sac, only 6 units total. Still, something about the sound made me uneasy. I looked through the blinds in my living room, but the street outside was empty, bathed in the yellow glow of a street lamp. "Get a grip, Eli," I muttered. I went back to my phone, ordered pizza, and turned on the TV. Around 8:15, a knock rattled my front door. Not a light, polite knock. A heavy one, deliberate. My stomach tightened. I wasn't expecting anyone except the delivery guy, but the food app said it was still 10 minutes away. I walked to the door quietly and peeked through the peephole. A man stood on the porch, mid-30s, maybe older. He wore a gray hoodie, pulled up over his head, and had his hands shoved deep into the pockets. He wasn't holding a pizza box. He wasn't smiling. I didn't open the door. Yeah? I called through it, trying to sound casual. There was a pause before he spoke, his voice low, rough. Sorry, man. My car broke down. Can I use your phone? I hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. Sorry, I can't help, I said quickly. Good luck, though. Another long pause. Then, come on, man. Just a quick call. Won't take a minute. Something about the way he said it, flat, almost rehearsed, sent a chill up my spine. I said no. Sorry, I stepped back from the door. Silence. No footsteps walking away. Just silence. I went to the kitchen, trying to shake it off. That's when I heard it. The faint click of the back gate outside. My townhouse had a small fenced yard with a gate leading to the alley. My chest tightened. I grabbed a kitchen knife, the biggest one I had, and held it awkwardly in my hand as I crept toward the sliding glass door at the back of the house. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a shadow moving on the other side. Who's there? I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. Just the shadow shifting, slowly, like whoever it was didn't care if I knew they were there. Then the handle of the sliding door rattled. Once. Twice. My blood turned cold. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's trying to break into my house, I whispered, crouching behind the counter. I'm at 1824 Millbrook Court. Please send someone fast. Stay on the line with me, the operator said. Are you alone in the house? Yes, I said, voice cracking. I heard glass shatter. My heart lurched. The back door. He's inside, I whispered. Oh my God, he's inside. Stay calm. Officers are on their way. Can you secure yourself in a room? I sprinted up the stairs, 2 at a time, knife still in my hand, phone clutched in the other. I slammed my bedroom door shut and shoved my dresser against it, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear. Downstairs, footsteps echoed. Slow. Deliberate. Where are the police? I whispered into the phone. They're on their way. Just stay quiet. Stay where you are. The footsteps moved through my living room. I could hear drawers being pulled open, objects clattering. Whoever he was, he wasn't in a hurry. Then silence again. I strained to listen. Minutes passed. My hand ached from clutching the knife too tight. Then suddenly, the floor creaked. Upstairs this time. My blood ran ice cold. He was on the second floor. I held my breath as the footsteps came closer. He stopped right outside my bedroom door. The handle jiggled once, then twice. Then a voice, low and mocking, right on the other side. Open up, Eli. My stomach dropped. He knew my name. I didn't answer. Didn't move. Open the door, he whispered, almost sing-song. I just want to talk. The door rattled harder. Then, silence. For a moment I thought he'd left. Then the sound of wood splintering filled the room. He was kicking the door. I pressed harder against the dresser, heart slamming. Police are almost there, the operator said in my ear. Hold on just a little longer. But in that moment I didn't think I'd last another second. Just as the dresser began to slide under the force of his kicks, a new sound cut through everything, the wail of sirens, close, growing closer. The pounding on my door stopped. For a few seconds, the house was silent again. Then I heard quick footsteps retreating, the crash of the sliding door opening and the sound of boots crunching on snow outside. I didn't move until I heard voices shouting downstairs. Police! Come out with your hands up. When they finally opened my bedroom door, I was shaking so hard I couldn't even speak. They didn't catch him that night. I had to give my statement while still trembling, my throat raw from fear. They found footprints in the snow, a shattered back door, and a few things missing. My laptop, my wallet, some random electronics. But what haunted me most wasn't what he took. It was the way he said my name. To this day, I don't know how he knew it. Maybe he'd been watching me. Maybe he'd followed me home some night and heard a neighbor call out to me. Or maybe, Just maybe. He'd been inside before while I was gone, learning the layout, going through my things. I moved out of that townhouse 3 weeks later, and now every time I hear silence at night, I wonder if somewhere out there, someone else is pressing their ear to a door, whispering my name. I live alone in a small one-bedroom house in the quiet suburbs of Maplewood. For me, it's just the right size enough room to stretch out without feeling empty, and cozy enough that I can actually feel at home. I moved here about a year ago, hoping for peace after bouncing between shared apartments and tiny studio spaces for most of my 20s. My name's Liam Carter, and I work as a freelance graphic designer, which mostly means I'm on my laptop for hours at a time, headphones on, insulated from the rest of the world. The house itself is modest brick exterior, a small porch, one-car garage attached, and a backyard that barely fits a grill and a couple of chairs. A quiet street ends just past my driveway, so there's rarely traffic or noise. At first, I loved the peace, the control, the sense of my own private space. But one night, that sense of security cracked in a way I'll never forget. It was a Thursday in late October. The air had that unmistakable chill that meant winter was around the corner, but not yet here. I'd spent the day working on a client project, alternating between my laptop and scribbling ideas in a notebook. Around 7, I made a simple dinner pasta with store-bought sauce and ate in front of the TV. "Okay, Liam," I said aloud to nobody. "Just a couple of episodes and then bed early. No late-night doom scrolling." The living room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. My cat Milo curled on the arm of the couch, purring softly. I wrapped myself in a blanket and scrolled through the streaming options. Eventually, I settled on a new mystery show. By 10:30, I was fully relaxed, popcorn in hand, the TV flickering across the walls. Then I heard a faint, dragging sound coming from the far end of the house. At first, I thought it was the show, but when I muted it, the sound persisted. It was subtle, almost like footsteps, but not quite. A soft scuff, a scrape, then silence. My pulse quickened. "No, it's probably the heater," I whispered, trying to reason with myself. But the sound came again, clearer this time, near the garage. My breath caught. "Hello?" I called softly, trying not to panic. "Is someone there?" Nothing. Just the quiet settling of the house. I got up slowly, trying to stay calm, and walked toward the garage through the pantry. The farther I went, the louder my heartbeat became. The noise, definitely a shuffle, was coming from inside. I paused at the garage door, hand hovering over the knob. I flicked on the garage light. Shadows stretched across the cement floor, empty shelves standing like sentinels. Nothing moved. I peered into every corner. "Okay, maybe I'm imagining it," I muttered, forcing myself to breathe slowly. I closed the garage door and returned to the couch, but every creak of the house made me flinch. Eventually, exhaustion overpowered fear, and I fell asleep, Milo curling tightly against my chest. The next morning I woke to sunlight spilling through the blinds. Stretching, I yawned and headed to the kitchen for coffee. That's when I froze. The front door was wide open. My stomach dropped. I ran to the garage. That door, too, was open. I had locked both doors before bed. Panic surged. I ran through the house, checking every room, closets, and under furniture. Nothing. No one. The reality sank in. Someone had been in my house while I slept. I sank into a kitchen chair, trembling. Oh my God, someone was here. I whispered to myself. Milo rubbed against my leg, as if sensing my fear. I called my friend Jared. "Hey, I think someone broke into my house last night," I said, voice shaking. "What? Are you serious?" Jared replied. "Liam, are you okay?" I don't know. Everything's gone? No, nothing's missing. But the doors, they were open. I don't know what to do. Did you call the police? I don't know if I should. There's no proof. Just, I don't know this feeling. It's like they were here and left. For weeks, I couldn't sleep properly. Every sound made me jump the mailman. a car door slamming, even Milo's claws on the floorboards. I installed extra locks, motion sensor lights, and a camera in the living room and near the garage. The first night after the break-in attempt, I sat on the couch for hours, staring at the garage door. Every slight creak made me flinch. My imagination ran wild. What if they'd left something behind? What if they were still watching? Jared came over one evening. "You're freaking yourself out, man," he said. "I'm not," I snapped, though my voice betrayed me. "Something happened. Someone was here. I can feel it." "You didn't see anyone, right?" "No. But I know it. I know it," I whispered, staring at the shadows. Months passed. Nothing else happened. No break-ins, no sounds, no sign that anyone had ever been inside. But I never felt fully safe again. I double-checked doors at night, even locked the inside of the garage door I rarely touched. The peace I once felt in my small house was gone. Every little sound made my heart race. Every shadow seemed suspicious. I never found out who it was, or why they entered. But sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, I swear I hear that soft shuffle again. Just for a moment, near the garage, and I freeze, wondering if they're still around, invisible, waiting. I realized I'll never fully feel safe in my own home. The thought is terrifying but also oddly grounding. It's a reminder that the world can feel harmless one minute and threatening the next, and that control is an illusion. I live my life more cautiously now, but I never leave my doors unlocked again. Some nights I tell Milo, softly, "It's okay, buddy. We're safe." And yet, I know deep down, the house remembers, and maybe someone else does too. I had just turned 20 and was home from college for the summer, relishing the rare feeling of being able to sleep in my own bed without the usual dorm chaos. My best friend, who I'll call Lena, had recently moved into a small, steeply perched house on the outskirts of Ravenwood Hills with her boyfriend, Evan, and who had just started a night shift at the local hospital. Lena and I had been inseparable since high school, and I had always known her to be a little on edge. Prone to anxiety, but lovable and fiercely loyal. I, too, battled my own bouts of anxiety, but after living alone at college for a year, I had developed a tolerance for the quiet unease of solitude. Her house was small, a single story at the top of a hill that overlooked a dense forest stretching far behind it. The backyard was tiny, dug out so it could wrap around to the front of the house, with a set of concrete steps leading up from a narrow sidewalk. The kitchen had a back door with a large glass window, and outside that window was a motion sensor light mounted on the doorframe, angled to illuminate the small sidewalk. The strange thing about it was that it couldn't detect anything in the yard itself, only movement on the sidewalk. It was a Tuesday when Lena first mentioned the light. She called me in a panic around 3 in the morning, her voice shaking so badly that I could hear her breathing over the phone. "Jade, you're not asleep, right?" she whispered. "I'm up. What's wrong?" I murmured, rubbing my eyes. "It's someone or something. The light outside. It keeps flickering on and off. I swear, Jade, it's moving." I took a deep breath. "Okay, slow down. Are you sure it's not just a raccoon or something? Or maybe the wind set it off?" She laughed nervously. "It's too precise. It's like someone is watching. I keep looking, and it stops, and then it starts again." I could feel her fear seep through the phone. "All right, Lena, I'll stay on the line with you. Just don't go near the door. Sit on the couch, stay calm. I'm here." She clutched her blanket tighter. "I can't. I feel like I can see it, Jade. I can't sleep." We stayed like that for hours, me whispering reassurances while she kept her eyes glued to the window. When Evan came home early the next morning, the light had remained dormant the entire night. His presence seemed to anchor the house, making the unknown feel slightly less threatening. "Maybe it was just someone doing a dry run," he said over breakfast. "I've heard about break-ins in the neighborhood across the street. Just be careful, Lena." The next time Evan had a night shift, Lena begged me to come stay over. I agreed, figuring that my presence would ease her anxiety and perhaps calm the strange occurrences. We arrived around 7 in the evening, carrying an air mattress for the living room. The night started normally enough. We watched a few movies, laughing and quoting lines from old comedies, trying to distract ourselves from the tiny unease that lingered at the edges of the house. Around 11, Lena suggested we make a quick trip to the vape store at the McDonald's about 40 minutes away. "Jade, you don't have to come," she said as we pulled out of the driveway. "It's late, and the roads are creepy." "I know," I said with a half smile. "But I'd rather be out with you than stuck here, imagining shadows and monsters." When we returned around 12:30 a.m., the air mattress was already inflated. We crawled onto it in the living room, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. Then, without warning, the motion sensor light outside tripped again. "Lena, probably just an animal," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though my stomach twisted into knots. "No, Jade, look at it, it's on again," she whispered fiercely. The light flicked on and off intermittently, longer and longer each time. Lena, ever so anxious, went upstairs to grab Evan's gun. I followed slowly, my heart racing, but I tried to maintain a veneer of rationality. "Jade," she called from the top of the stairs, "I have a gun. I'm not afraid to use it." I forced a laugh. "All right, that's comforting." The light flickered again, and I noticed how our shadows stretched long and thin across the living room walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone, that someone had been watching us, lurking just beyond the small perimeter of the house, waiting for a moment of weakness. Hours passed in silence, punctuated only by the occasional flicker of light. Around 4 a.m., I got up to grab a glass of water. When I turned back, Lena was lying on the mattress, her face pale, her eyes wide. "Jade, get back," she whispered urgently. I froze, slowly turning my head to see the light outside once again cutting through the darkness. It wasn't just a reflection or a random flicker, it was deliberate, precise, and unmistakably human in its cadence. "Who's there?" I called out softly, but there was no answer. Just the steady hum of the forest and the occasional rustle of leaves. The light continued until the sun began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in pale pinks and oranges. Then, suddenly, it stopped. No flicker, no movement, just silence. We considered calling the police but hesitated. What if they thought it was a prank call? What if Lena and I were accused of wasting their time? The thought made my stomach churn, but the memory of those hours left us both shaken, hyper-aware of every creak and shadow in the house. Even after that night, whenever Lena and I were alone in the house after dark, I felt a weight pressing on my chest, an unease that didn't belong to anything natural. I still think someone had ill intentions that night. Perhaps they intended to break in and realized we weren't entirely alone. Or perhaps it was something more sinister, a perverse thrill derived from watching our fear. Lena's anxiety worsened, and mine, though tempered by experience, never fully subsided. Every late night, every flicker of light in the darkness, brings me back to that summer night in Ravenwood Hills. And though nothing else ever happened again while Evan was home, or even afterward, I can't shake the nagging feeling that someone, somewhere, had been observing us, and that for those hours, we were not alone. I never thought a single weekend could change the way I felt about being alone in my own home. But last Saturday proved me wrong in every possible way. My name is Marcus Whitaker. I'm 20 years old, and I live in a suburban town called Ridgefield, just outside of Syracuse, New York. Most of the time I'm away at college, but during summers I stay at home with my parents. I've always been the kind of person who prefers quiet nights in video games and late-night movies over going out. So being home alone never really scared me, not until this. My parents, Laura and Stephen Whitaker, had been planning to attend their close friend's wedding in Vermont for months. They left Friday afternoon, and I stayed behind. I wasn't close to the couple getting married, and to be honest, I liked the idea of having the entire house to myself for the weekend. No one to ask me to mow the lawn, no nagging about dirty dishes. Just me, the big screen TV in the living room, and 2 days of peace. The Whitaker house is a split level with pale gray siding and a deck overlooking a wooded backyard. We're tucked away at the very end of a dead-end street, which means we don't get random visitors. Delivery drivers sometimes get lost trying to find us. It's the kind of neighborhood where people wave politely, but everyone mostly keeps to themselves. Friday night was perfect. I stayed up late, sprawled on the living room couch, watching movies until nearly 2 a.m. The rain tapping against the windows made it feel cozy. The couch is ridiculously comfortable, so I decided to just crash there instead of heading to my bedroom upstairs. When I woke up the next morning, I immediately noticed how quiet the house was. Too quiet. The blinds on the sliding glass doors were mostly closed, but through a small 5-foot gap, I saw streaks of rain still sliding down the glass. The clock on the TV screen read 9:32 a.m. I rubbed my eyes, sat up, and grabbed the remote. I turned on the TV, not because I wanted to watch anything specific, but because I hated the silence. That's when I heard it. Knock. Knock. 2 light taps at the front door. Not loud, not aggressive, but sharp enough that my stomach tightened instantly. Who the hell is knocking at this hour? I whispered. Nobody ever knocked on our door, especially not at 9:30 on a rainy Saturday morning. I stayed frozen on the couch, staring toward the front hallway. From where I sat, I couldn't see the door, and I prayed whoever was out there couldn't see me either. For a split second, I told myself it was probably Amazon. I had ordered a few things earlier in the week. That thought calmed me just enough to pick up my phone and check the app. My order history popped up, and my stomach dropped. The delivery wasn't scheduled until 5 p.m. The knock didn't come again. Whoever it was, they were just standing out there. Okay, relax. Maybe it's a neighbor, I muttered to myself, though my voice was shaking. I finally got up, crept toward the small window near the front door, and lifted the edge of the curtain. Nobody was there. I exhaled shakily and forced a nervous laugh. See? Nothing. Just me freaking out. I turned back toward the living room. Creak, creak, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on wood. On our back deck. My blood went cold. I froze in place, staring at the blinds covering the sliding glass doors. Slowly, I shifted just enough to peek through the narrow gap. That's when I saw him. A man. Bald. Mid-40s. Pale skin. Drenched in rain. He wore a black jacket and black pants, and he was standing on the deck, staring straight at me. No expression. No movement. Just staring. My breath caught in my throat. Then he gripped the handle of the sliding door and pulled. The lock held, but the glass rattled under the force. Oh my God, I whispered. I bolted down the hall and locked myself in the bathroom. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely twist the lock. I pressed my back against the door, trying to steady my breathing. Then came the first bang against the glass. I jumped. Another bang. Louder. I needed my phone. It was still on the couch. No, no, no. I whispered, pacing in the small bathroom. I cracked the door open, heart hammering, and sprinted to the living room. The man was still outside, kicking at the sliding door. The glass shook, but hadn't shattered. I grabbed my phone off the couch, then made a mad dash back to the bathroom. Just as I slammed the door shut, I heard another brutal crack against the glass. Hands shaking, I dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? A calm female voice answered. There's a man trying to break into my house, I blurted, my words tumbling out. He's in the back. He's trying to smash the glass door. I'm alone. Please hurry. Sir, slow down. What's your address? I rattled it off as fast as I could. We have officers en route. Stay on the line with me, okay? I nodded frantically even though she couldn't see me. That's when I heard it. Crash. The sliding door shattered. The operator's voice buzzed in my ear. Stay calm. Where are you now? He's inside, I whispered, retreating into the shower and clutching my phone. He's coming. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Moving through the living room. Closer. He reached the bathroom door and tried the handle. Locked. Then the pounding started. Thud. 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 I pressed the phone tight against my ear. But before I could speak, The screen went black. Dead battery. I wanted to scream. The banging grew harder, louder. I pictured the wood splintering the way the glass had. Then it stopped. Silence. I held my breath. A minute passed. Then 2. I heard his footsteps move away, down the stairs. Was he leaving? I didn't trust it. I curled up in the small bathroom closet, pulling towels over myself, shaking so badly I could barely breathe. Suddenly, boom, the bathroom door rattled violently. Then again, harder. He'd found something heavy. Maybe the baseball bat my dad kept in the garage. I bit my lip to stop myself from making a sound. Tears stung my eyes. And then, "Police, open up." The shout came from the front door. I barely dared to believe it. The banging on the bathroom door stopped. Footsteps retreated. Fast. Then chaos erupted, shouts, commands. Heavy boots pounding the floor. "Put it down, hands where I can see them." More yelling, then silence. I didn't move until I heard a firm knock on the bathroom door. "Marcus? It's the police. You're safe now." I opened the closet door, then the bathroom door, stepping out with shaking legs. 2 officers stood in the hallway, their uniforms soaked from the rain. One of them spoke gently. "We've got him. You're okay." I wanted to collapse right there on the floor. The man had been caught in the backyard, still clutching the bat. He never said a word, even as they dragged him away. It's been a week since then. I still don't sleep in the living room anymore. I can't look at the sliding glass doors without remembering his face staring back at me. And the worst part? The police never figured out why he came to my house. He wasn't from Ridgefield. He had no connection to my family. He just showed up. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I swear I can still hear the soft echo of those 2 knocks at the front door. I was 10 years old when it happened, and even though it's been many years since that night, I still can't walk into a quiet house without remembering. My name is Julian Harper, and back then I lived with my parents and my older sister in a quiet suburb called Maplewood, Ohio. Our neighborhood wasn't the type where people locked their doors all the time. It was the kind of place where kids left bikes in front yards overnight and nothing ever happened to them. The houses sat on tree-lined streets, modest 2 stories with porches and attics no one really used. Everyone thought Maplewood was safe. I thought it was safe too until that night. My dad, David Harper, worked as a mechanic. He was practical, stubborn, and always smelled faintly of oil and metal. My mom, Laura, was a 2nd-grade teacher at the local elementary school. She had a soft voice that could calm just about anyone. Though, when she got serious, we all listened. My sister, Samantha, was 14. We fought all the time over stupid things like the TV remote, or who got the bigger slice of pizza, but deep down, I knew she cared about me. I was the kid who preferred staying inside with video games or books instead of going shopping with my parents. That Friday was no different. I remember throwing my backpack on the floor by the couch when I got home from school. Mom was at the counter, scribbling down a shopping list, while Dad leaned against the doorway jingling his car keys. Samantha sat at the table scrolling through her phone, pretending not to listen. "Julian," Mom said, "we're heading to the outlet mall. Do you want to come?" I didn't even look up from my Nintendo DS. "Nah, I just want to play here." Dad raised his eyebrows. "You're sure?" "We'll be gone a couple of hours. Maybe 3. "I'll be fine," I said quickly. "I don't feel like walking around stores." Samantha smirked. "You're gonna be all by yourself, scaredy cat." "I'm not scared," I shot back. "I'm 10, not 5. "All right," Mom said, sighing but smiling a little. She crouched down to my level and brushed her fingers through my hair. "Lock the doors, okay? And don't answer if someone knocks." "I know, Mom," I muttered. Dad gave me a pointed look. "We mean it, Julian. Don't open the door for anyone. Got it?" "Yes, Dad." "Okay then," Mom said, grabbing her purse. "We'll be back after dinner. Call the landline if you need us." The front door closed behind them. I listened to the sound of the car backing out of the driveway, and then silence settled over the house. That silence always felt heavier when you were alone. I ran upstairs to my room at the front of the house and powered on my Xbox. The whir of the console starting up was comforting. I grabbed a bag of chips, plopped down on the floor, and booted up my favorite game. I hadn't even gotten through the opening cutscene when I heard it. A sound. At first, I thought it was just the house creaking. But this was different. It was soft, deliberate, like weight shifting on wood. It came from the hallway right outside my bedroom. I froze. My door was cracked open about 3 feet. Slowly, I leaned forward and peered through the gap. That's when I saw him. A man, climbing down the wooden ladder from our attic. My stomach dropped so fast I felt like I was falling. He was tall, wearing a dirty jacket and jeans. His back turned to me as he carefully placed his foot on the hallway carpet. I jerked back into my room, my heart slamming against my ribs. He hadn't seen me. At least, I prayed he hadn't. For a moment, I just crouched there, frozen. My brain couldn't process it. Why was there a man in our attic? We never went up there except maybe once or twice a year for Christmas decorations. He started walking down the hallway, towards my room. Instinct kicked in. I dropped to the floor, slid under my bed, and pressed myself flat against the carpet. My heartbeat was so loud I was sure he would hear it. His footsteps creaked closer, then past. He kept walking, heading down the stairs. From under my bed, with my ear pressed to the floor, I could hear the faint vibrations of him moving around downstairs. Drawers opening, a chair scraping. My chest ached from holding my breath. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab the landline in the kitchen and dial 911. But that was downstairs. Past him. I whispered to myself, "Stay quiet. Just stay quiet." Minutes crawled by like hours. Then footsteps on the stairs again. He was coming back up. I shut my eyes, holding my breath so long my lungs burned. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused, then walked past my room again. A creak of wood, the sound of the attic ladder unfolding. And then silence. I stayed under the bed. I don't know how long. My legs were cramping. My chest hurt, but I didn't dare move. When I finally heard the familiar sound of a key turning in the front door and my mom's voice calling, "Julian, we're home." I bolted. I scrambled out from under the bed, sprinted down the stairs, and nearly crashed into Mom. "Mom, Dad, Sam," I screamed. There was a man in the house. He was in the attic." They all froze. Dad frowned. "Julian, what are you talking about?" "Dad, I saw him, I swear. He came down from the attic ladder and walked around." Samantha rolled her eyes. "You probably imagined." But Dad's face changed when he looked at me. He saw the panic, the tears starting to form in my eyes. He knew I wasn't lying. Without another word, he grabbed the baseball bat from the umbrella stand and marched upstairs. Mom pulled me close. "It's okay, sweetheart, it's okay." But her voice was tight, her hands trembling. A moment later, Dad's voice echoed down the stairs. "Laura, call the police." When the officers arrived, they pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up. I stayed pressed against Mom's side, shaking. It didn't take long before one of the officers called out, "He's here. We got him." They dragged a man out of the attic, handcuffed and wild-eyed. He looked dirtier up close, his hair greasy, his face pale. He didn't fight much, just muttered under his breath as they let him out. The police later told us he had been living in our attic for days, maybe weeks. There were sleeping bags, food wrappers, even empty bottles up there. Somehow, we hadn't noticed. Somehow, I had been sleeping just beneath him night after night. Dad locked the attic and changed the bolts the very next morning. But no matter what he did, the house never felt the same to me again. For years afterward, if I was ever alone in the house, I'd hear phantom creaks, phantom footsteps. I never again sat in silence without straining to hear what was above me. And even now, as an adult, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, certain I can hear breathing from the attic.